Good evening. I do want to start by saying happy Bosses Day. We enjoy working with you, Dr. McLaughlin. Thank you for leading us. All right, so tonight I wanted to talk about least restrictive environment, which is a component of the federal regulations of Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. This is the explicit definition of LRE, and I underlined the most relevant components, which is in every IEP meeting, we are obligated to have a conversation about how are we educating students with a disability to the maximum extent possible alongside other students that don't have disabling conditions. So that is part of the law, and we are required to have this conversation in every IEP meeting. So there are a couple levels of accountability for least restrictive environment, and I apologize up front if I end up using acronyms. It's definitely part of my job, so if I say LRE, I mean least restrictive environment. From the federal level, which is where that IDEA regulation comes from, they monitor every school district in every state on 14 indicators. If you're receiving federal funding under IDEA, you have to submit data regarding these 14 indicators. And we submit that data to the state 2 times a year, once in December and once in June. And then CDE does an initial evaluation of our data against those 14 indicators, and then the state compiles all the district information and sends it to the federal government. What we're going to focus on tonight is Indicator 5 of the 14 indicators. And Indicator 5 focuses on least restrictive environment. So the federal level sets these measurements. So when we're thinking about LRE as an indicator and monitoring, they are looking at what % of our population of students with special needs are in general education for 80% or more of the time. How many of our students are in general ed for 40 to 79% of the time? How many are in less than 40% of the time? And then how many are at a separate school or facility? And the monitoring of LRE is really intended to improve the quality of education for all students with a heavy emphasis on the students with disabilities. So it's not arbitrary, this measurement. It is about what research has shown to be the best opportunity for students with disabilities. So I wanted to share with you the most recent available state data from the federal government on how each state is measuring up with the LRE requirements. And unfortunately, California is 8th from the bottom. So as a state, we have not been doing a great job. And I debated whether or not to add in here information on a lawsuit that exists in California called the Ravenswood lawsuit. That is a lawsuit where families within several school districts sued the state of California for failure to monitor closely enough implementation of special education. So the federal government now is monitoring California more closely because of the continued failure to meet the targets at the state level. It's called the Ravenswood lawsuit. So California is 8th from the bottom. And then I wanted to share, and going back, there is not new data yet from the state level, otherwise I would have provided that. So that is 15-16 school year information. Then I want to share with you, this is exactly what we get from the state of California, and this is the measurement for Indicator 5 of LRE. And this is in particular where we are running into a little bit of difficulty. They expected that 38.6 of our students with an IEP would spend 80% of the time in general ed, and we did not meet that indicator, and this was again for the 15-16 school year. So ultimately, we missed the target, and this is just a repeat of that information. They wanted us to have 49.2% of our students in general ed for 80%. We only had 38.6 of our students in general ed for 80% or more of the time. So we missed the target in 15-16. We get another piece of paper from CDE looking at the same indicator, and now we're in 16-17 school year. And with each year, CDE ups the target level. So this, in 16-17, they expected 50.2% of our population to be in general ed for 80% or more of the time. And again, we did not meet the target. We only had 39.9% of our students in general ed for 80% or more of the time. As I mentioned, CDE raises that expectation every year. It's not a stagnant number. And unfortunately, we missed the target again in 16-17. So this last school year, 17-18, CDE has not provided us with the information on the indicators formally. We are waiting for those specific findings. However, CDE has informed our SELPA that we did miss the target again on this LRE indicator for last year. So we now are 3 years in a row with results indicating we have a disproportionate representation of our students in too restrictive of settings. So why do they monitor LRE? And here are some of the reasons why this is an important indicator. Research does show that the more time students with disabilities are in general ed, the better their achievement outcomes are. And I think we all remember our dashboard from last year where students with an IEP were in red for English language arts and in orange for math. So the achievement results were grim. It does increase their opportunities to complete A through G requirements. It does increase high school graduation rates, college entrance rates, and there's absolutely social emotional benefits from being included in the general ed setting, and there is an increased sense of belonging in your school community when you're not separated. This slide, and I apologize that the font is so small, I wanted to share to build on the reasons why monitoring LRE matters. This is analysis conducted by VCOE for students in Ventura County that are eligible for special education under 4 categories: specific learning disability, other health impairment, speech and language impairment, and autism. And 3 of those 4, speech and language, other health impairment, and a specific learning disability, the majority, if not all of those kids, have average intelligence. They just learn differently. Autism, many students on the autism spectrum also have average intelligence or have splintered skills and have very high levels of intelligence in certain areas. So they highlighted the categories of eligibility when gathering this data because we know when you have average ability, you should be able to make adequate progress yearly in your achievement. So on this slide, what I want to highlight is the purple columns highlight the achievement rate for ELA, English Language Arts, for students that are outside of general ed for 80% or more of their time. Whereas the column in red, those are students with, again, an IEP or special ed eligibility, but they're in general ed for 80% or more of the time. So you can see the substantial difference in achievement when our students do have access to the general ed setting. And the next slide is a comparable for math. The blue columns represent students that are outside of general ed for more than 80% of the time, and the orange column is students with special needs or disability, and they're inside general ed. You can still see that we're pretty far below meeting the standard, but nonetheless, there's a pretty big gap in achievement when they're outside of general ed more than 80% of the time. And an additional reason why monitoring LRE matters is you want to prevent going into what's called significant disproportionality. That is an official term used in IDEA and in California Ed Code. And to be labeled as being in significant disproportionality, it means you have missed the target on an indicator 3 years in a row or 3 out of 4 years. And as I already showed, we have missed 3 out of 4 years on indicator 5. So when that happens, the district or the state then identifies you as being significantly disproportionate. And with that comes some sanctions. The first of which is 15% of your IDEA funds, they have to be specifically directed to correcting the indicator that you are now SIG dis on. And you don't get new money to correct this, by the way. It's from the existing allocation. And then CDE requires our participation in a task force to conduct a root cause analysis of why is this happening and why haven't we been able to get ourselves out of it. That will require participation with a variety of stakeholders, and it's not just one meeting, it's quite a few meetings. The district then becomes obligated to write up what's known as the Coordinated Early Intervening Services Plan, the SACE plan. It's a very complex document, and it details out your roadmap of how you're going to correct on this indicator. And then you absolutely it comes with increased level of direct monitoring and reporting requirements from CDE. You want to avoid going into SIG-DIS. So I want to share what actions we've taken, because we did become aware of this last year, and this is what we've taken so far. We have informed staff about the LRE requirements and what our data was showing. We've talked to principals about it quite a few times at principals meeting with a really lengthy and I thought robust discussion at the last principals meeting last week. We have spoken with all of our special education staff about it. We do have ongoing LRE team meetings at the district level with the instructional directors and the special ed leadership team. And then we have been providing the LRE data to principals for their individual sites so that they have more detailed information about what their percentages are looking like on their campus. We also this year sent staff, both administrators and teachers, to co-teacher training at VCOE. We have begun to implement co-teaching at some of our sites. We are moving away from content-specific special ed classes. An example of that would be U.S. history in high school, where that's a content where general ed teachers are credentialed in that content area, but the special ed teacher is not. So we're looking at moving away from the content-specific classes. And we have been drafting, I give a lot of credit to the instructional directors, a strategic plan to roll out universal designs for learning as an instructional pedagogy in the district. So some of our next steps, we certainly need to provide training to our general ed teachers. We are going to be looking at and evaluating school site master schedules. How are we scheduling students with a disability? What classes are we putting them in? Which classes aren't made available to them? We are auditing and adjusting our secondary level course offerings. We're looking to develop and submit some course requests to CSU and UC boards. We're expanding co-teaching opportunities, and we want to review inclusion opportunities that already exist and expand on those successes. And this will require ongoing professional learning for all school site staff. And I just wanted to provide some clarifications. I added this today, so it wasn't in the uploaded one. I apologize. We will continue to offer a comprehensive range of special education services. I just want to make sure that that's clear. We do recognize the importance of supporting and training our teachers to meet the diverse learning needs of all students in the classroom. LRE is a joint effort between general ed and special ed. We are working closely together. And time pulled out from general ed continues to be a requirement in IEP meetings by the IEP team. So I just wanted to make sure it was clear that will still be part of the IEP process. And that's it. Happy to answer any questions. Appreciate your time.